Welcome to the Customer Smarts podcast, where you'll discover smarter ways to deliver customer experiences. I'm your host, Justin Stafford. For many of us, coffee plays a vital role in our day. It helps get us cranked up in the morning, but it's also the social drink of choice when you need to meet someone for a quick catch-up. Over the last 30 years, the interest in coffee has exploded. There's coffee shops and cafes in every nook and cranny. There are mobile coffee carts in popular car parks, at the beach, or even where we walk our dogs. And many of us have our own machines at home. My guest in this episode, Nick Lee, has spent a large part of his career focused on designing the most innovative experiences possible for coffee drinkers, which is done all over the world with leading electronics brands like Philips, Seiko, and DeLonghi. In this episode, we're going to explore some of the things you didn't know about coffee, some really interesting insights about coffee drinkers, and some great stories of innovation in the coffee space. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Justin. Great to be here.
I'd like to start by tapping into your knowledge of coffee drinkers. You've spent a lot of time developing products in this space, so obviously know coffee drinkers back to front. Can you give us a little lay of the land of what are the different types of coffee buyers and drinkers from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it really differs from around the world. If you look at Europe and you look at Northern Europe, you look at the Germans, the Dutch, the Scandinavians, they really drink a lot of long black coffee. I think the Finns have the global world champion record for the amount of coffee and the number of coffees that they consume per day, because they drink, I think, 10 or 11 big mugs of long, what you call drip filter coffee. There's a brand that's very popular in that part of the world called Mocha Master, and they love just dripping that long coffee and drinking it like we would drink water. The Italians, on the other hand, and the espresso culture that we now know globally, they're really into short, intense espresso, or, the milk-based coffees that we know, the cappuccino, the latte macchiato, and all of the derivatives that come from there. I mean, essentially, this mix of coffee, how long it's brewed for, how long it's infused for, the length, the strength, the coffee varieties, and then the milk quantity that you drink with that. There are literally infinite combinations, even to the extent that you have a drink that was invented here down under. New Zealand claims that it was invented in New Zealand, so the flat white.
Yeah. There's a long list of those things, aren't there?
Pavlova and all the rest of it. But the flat white was definitely invented down under. The piccolo also is a beverage which is typical to Australia and invented here. So it's that combination of that dark liquid combined with milk, or the almond milks, the oat milks, all of these other combinations that you have. It's really infinite, the combinations.
It's really exploded, hasn't it? At least the last 30 years, you're seeing coffee shops everywhere now. In every little surf club or dog park, there's a mobile coffee cart. There's one absolutely everywhere. So I guess
Support
you've got
your local barista.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess you've got the coffee drinkers who go out to get coffee and like that sort of social aspect of it, but also you've got the people at home who are making coffee at home as well, don't you?
Yeah, and that coffee at home, it's really exploded also during COVID as well, because we couldn't go out for coffee. So, being able to have your coffee of choice in the comfort of your own home was something that really grew exponentially. But just coming back to your question, where you talk about how coffee has grown, I think in no greater way can you see that than in Asia. If you think about China in particular, but also Korea, Japan, these are tea drinking cultures. Cha, as we also know it in English, have a cup of cha. Cha is the word that is used in Asia for tea. So tea drinkers who have transformed into coffee drinkers in the last 20, 30 years, certainly driven by Starbucks. I think it's the Starbucks effect and that expansion globally. the iced Americano, which is a very popular drink in Korea or in China, but also lattes and cappuccinos, and then all of the other flavored derivatives that come from that as well. You can see actually how American coffee culture has actually driven the growth of global coffee culture, and has then driven actually a desire to have great coffee that you'd normally have out of home, also in the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, right. And what are some of the things that would surprise a coffee drinker? What can you tell us that the average coffee drinker might not know?
Well, I'm not sure there is an average coffee drinker anymore. I think there are many experts out there. Um, what would you like to know, or what would be interesting? I think most people are aware of the different varieties of coffee, and there are two main variety of beans, the Robusta and the Arabica, which give different taste profiles. Arabica is more floral in its taste profile. Robusta can be a bit more charcoaly sometimes. And, it's actually that combination, sometimes the blend, or it's a particular type of Arabica that, tends to then influence the taste profile of a person. Very interesting. I remember I spoke once with the founder of Saeco, which is the company where I worked for a number of years. And Sergio Zappella, he was telling me that he was traveling around South America for an extended period of time, and he couldn't get his normal blend of coffee that he liked, so he just started to drink the local blends. When he came back to Italy, and then he started drinking his preferred, or he thought his preferred coffee blend, he actually didn't like the taste anymore. So there's also something about how when you consume something, you drink something, you become used to that taste profile. After 3-4 weeks, you're kind of sold on that taste, and that then becomes your preferred taste profile. So that's something interesting we've seen also in our own research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave us a little lesson, previously on all the different variables of coffee, like the temperature and other things like that, which are you wouldn't really think of. You go and buy coffee, and you order what you order because I guess you get used to what you like you mentioned, and then
Yes.
But there is a whole bunch of variables, the temperatures and things and the richness of the coffee that I'd never really thought that much about.
Yeah, well, if you think of drip coffee, and I mentioned the name of this machine before, the Mocha Master, which is kind of the world champion of drip coffee, they have actually calculated that the ideal infusion time for a drip coffee is 6 minutes. And essentially, there are two curves. There's a curve which is the oils and the taste profiles, which slowly diminishes over time. And there's also a curve which is the bitterness in the coffee, and that intersects at approximately 6 minutes. So if you go past that, you'll have a coffee which tastes too bitter. If you brew the coffee for less than that time, you won't actually extract all of the goodness and all of the oils and all of the taste profiles out of that drip coffee. But if you think to the experience you have when you're in a cafe or in Italy in a bar, there's a grinding process. So how fine is the coffee ground? There's a stamping process. So how is that actually pushed and pressed into the filter holder? There is a first infusion and a temperature of the water as well as it goes into the coffee, and then there is a flow time as it then extracts. So there's those 4 phases in the extraction of an espresso-based coffee that can each determine your experience. So is the grinder correctly calibrated? Is it at the right grind fineness or coarseness? What's the temperature of the water? You might find that if you go to a cafe and you are the unlucky recipient of the very first coffee of the day, you'll say, oh, that didn't quite taste so great. Or sometimes you'll have a coffee where the machine has been sitting idle perhaps for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then again, as the machine comes up to temperature, that first coffee that's coming out is not tasting as great. So ideally, you're having a coffee from a machine that is really working in a constant thermal temperature range, because consistency and constancy is perfect actually for the great result.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting. Yeah, so many different aspects to consider. And then obviously you spent a lot of time in the consumer electronics brands. You worked for Philips, Seiko,
Yes.
and DeLonghi, and all of those household brands.
Absolutely.
So what's interesting is that quite often they're very focused on the product because that's what they do. So
Yes.
did you find it challenging to get those organizations to think from a customer point of view? How did you tackle that?
Yes. I mean, it's a great question, and it's often the debate or the dilemma in organizations. Is this an engineering-led organization or is this a consumer insight-led organization? And companies or brands can also swing. It's a pendulum, where it's not always or necessarily one and the other. The ideal combination is a co-creative part where there will be a consumer insight or there will be an engineering insight, and then it's a question of how do those two elements bounce off each other to then move forward. I've seen many examples across many different businesses. I mean, here we're talking about coffee, but I've seen them across the consumer businesses within Philips in particular. And it's really that combination where they come together that works the best. When I took on the role as the CEO of Seiko, I think the pendulum had swung in the other direction. It was a very engineering-led approach. Lots of guys, because they were, 100% guys actually in the engineering department, playing around with stuff, thinking of things, having ideas, and ideas that to them sounded great. One of the things you look at in terms of the extraction of coffee and espresso is what's called TDS, or total dry solid. So how much of the coffee is actually picked up and extracted by the water and ends up in your cup, and then you can then measure how much, if you like, solid content, the total dry matter, is actually inside the liquid. And one of the engineers had come up with a way for extracting 1% more of the total dry solid, which he thought was a great invention. The thing is, from a consumer perspective, consumers were not really saying this is something that we want or need or is missing from our lives, if you like. The classic marketing driven insight where consumers say, this is a pain point, or this is something that I would like you to address. How can you engineer to solve that? So our team had been working on this amazing brewing group inside the machine that was going to get 1% more coffee out of the beans. Whereas actually what consumers were saying were, can you make the operation of the machine simpler? I find it quite complicated. Or I really want to make a latte, but I don't really want to froth the milk. I'm not interested in becoming a barista. I just want to push a button and get an amazing latte at home.
So how did you sort of I guess, stop it being too engineering led, and then you head down that path where the engineers have created what they think is great? And
very difficult.
Yeah. So did you obviously do a lot of customer or consumer testing and research? So how did you sort of balance that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And you see it again and again also in businesses where you have two sides of the debate. It's literally like a debate, almost like a parliamentary debating chamber. You've got the government on this side and the opposition on that side, and they're kind of talking at each other. How do you actually bring them together? And it was a great insight that one of the colleagues had, which was when we do these marketing focus groups, or when we do shelf tests or beauty tests and lineups, and you'll bring 10 consumers at a time into a focus room. You'll listen to what they say. You'll take them through a feature card, you'll take them through a beauty test, you'll put the brand, you'll put the price, and then you'll see essentially how consumer preference changes over the course of that research. We took the engineers also to that research. And, the advanced consumer marketing companies like the Procter and Gambles of this world be saying, well, that's obvious. You should be taking your engineers to these types of research. But we weren't doing that in Seiko. And there were some real light bulb moments where, chief engineer would come back and tell all of his colleagues, like, wow, I heard this consumer say this, or, that consumer said that. They really don't like this. This works amazingly well. This is an area for us to develop. So I guess if you can't take Muhammad to the mountain, take the mountain to Muhammad. And that was really impactful, actually, is breaking down that divide of the parliamentary chamber, if you like, and actually making it one group that focuses on what are consumers really interested in, what is it that will inspire them to pay top dollar for a machine, and what is it that they don't like. And there were thousands of insights that came out of that research.
Yeah. What were some of the big business challenges you were trying to tackle when you're working for these big companies in the coffee space? What was probably the most interesting big challenge you had to solve?
Yeah, there were numerous challenges. It's interesting. I started my coffee experience in DeLonghi, and DeLonghi at that stage, now it's a global powerhouse. It's the number one espresso machine manufacturer globally. But at that stage, just starting to explore, it was making, what are known as manual coffee machines. So where you have the filter holder, traditional small machines for household use, and very typical in Italy. But DeLonghi hadn't developed the technology for the full automatic coffee machine, or what's sometimes known as the bean to cup, where you put the beans in the top and the bean hopper and container. You have a brewing group inside and a grinder, and you can one touch have your different coffee varieties. So it was interesting to be in DeLonghi as DeLonghi built out that technology. Probably took them 5 to 6 years, because it's such a highly sensitive process in terms of calibrating the grinder, calibrating the brewing group, the water, the the electronic circuits. There are 10 different things going on inside that process. They all have to be perfectly calibrated so that when you push that button, you're getting the coffee that you're looking for. And this is not even to mention then the milk solutions that then come on top of that, the Venturi, which gives you the right combination of air, heat, and milk so that you have perfectly frothed milk at the touch of a button. But at the time when DeLonghi was developing, the main competitor globally, and in fact was the inventor of the full automatic, was Seiko. Now, some people here in Australia may know Seiko. It had quite a good presence here. And, Sergio and Artur, they are the founders of Seiko. They had built this company from 1986. It was an absolute powerhouse in Europe in the early 2000s. Then got sold to private equity, lost its way, and essentially lost its way so badly that it was acquired by Philips in 2009, and took quite a long time to kind of get back on its feet. So I was, brought in by Philips in 2014, and I guess the thing that struck me, Justin, was if I think about that area of Italy where Seiko was born, it's a powerhouse of mechanical electronic engineering, automotive as well. This is Emilia-Romagna is the home of Ferrari, Lamborghini, Ducati, just to name a few of the jewels in the crown. And Seiko had been like that, and it kind of lost its way. So I had this idea and this vision of how do we rebuild, the Lamborghini or the Ferrari of full auto espresso machine? How do we create a design which sits on that kitchen bench top and makes you look at it and go, wow, that's a piece of art. I'm proud to have that on my kitchen bench top. How do you create an experience where at the end of it, you feel like that was an amazing performance, that my coffee machine just did for me, and now I get to enjoy the fruits of its labors. So it was a real passion, I would say, to turn that company around from having lost its way, having had difficulties in launches and quality, quite some tensions also in the business, to actually get it back to being the past glory that it had been.
Yep. Yeah, can you talk us through the machine? You walked me through. There's obviously a lot of great memories from you, from the from the research and some of the insights that you pulled out.
Yes.
I found that really fascinating. Can you talk us through some of those?
Yeah. So the machine that really relaunched the company was a machine called Excelsis. And in the research that we were doing around Excelsis, we did a lot of shelf tests, actually with the top performing machines in the market, whether it was from DeLonghi, it was from Jura, from Krups, from Bosch. We really wanted to understand what is it that consumers actually like about the competitors' products. And what's really interesting is there's quite a patchwork. DeLonghi does this really well, Jura does this really well, Bosch does that really well. No one had everything, but let's say if there were 10 elements that you'd be looking for in a design, each one of them had 3 or 4. And one of the things that one consumer really liked on his Jura machine was that it had illumination. It had an LED light under the coffee irrigation point. And he said, it's amazing, when I'm brewing my coffee, the light goes on and it's almost like I imagine myself, I'm in a theater and, the curtain goes up, the lights go on, and then, the soprano starts singing, so it's like this amazing performance. So the designers were sitting there listening to this going, that's amazing, and although you could have kind of just passed over that comment as someone waxing lyrical about, how much they enjoy making coffee at home, the designers took that away and they said, we need to conceive the coffee machine and the way the consumer sees it like a stage, like a theater. So the drip tray where you put the coffee mug or cup on, let's not think of that as a drip tray, which is a very technical, functional use of that piece of the machine, but let's consider it the stage. This is where the performance is going to take place. Let's illuminate that. Let's create a backdrop to the stage, which is like a theater, like a Roman amphitheater curved. And, those kinds of elements then play back. Consumers then looked at the design that we created for the Excelsis. They didn't know why we had shaped it like that, but they looked at it and said, that looks great. And that's where, you've hit the mark and you're onto something, which then becomes a design platform that you can scale across different ranges. And of course, different products will vary slightly, but the fundamentals of the design will remain across all of the machines that you produce. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing insights and gems that can come out of that consumer research.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how just seeing that insight and then seeing it actually come to life and actually experience it firsthand as well. The other aspect that was really interesting was all the different profiles. Obviously, if you have one coffee machine in a house and it's, you've got a family and everyone's got different tastes, and then you have friends over and, the annoying thing is having to change settings and then change it back and constantly changing settings. But the machine that you worked on, that you can have multiple different profiles and setups and things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's again mimicking or mirroring the experience that you have out of home. I mean, if you go with 4 friends to a cafe, you're almost guaranteed that there will be 5 different types of coffee. I'd like a long black with an extra shot, or I'd like a cappuccino, not too much foam, but a little bit hotter milk temperature, or I'd like mine with almond milk, or I'd like my, it's, as I said to you at the beginning, the combinations are infinite, and it's that personalization and that relationship you also have with the barista. I think when it really hits the mark is you walk up to order from the barista, and they not only remember your name, but they remember exactly what it is that you want. And that's what we engineered into the machines as well, where you had profiles that you could save, so that when you come to the machine, you choose your profile, you've pre-saved your beverages, and whether it's the cappuccino or the latte macchiato or the espresso. I have a beverage that is very popular in Switzerland, which is called a caffè crema, which is something somewhere between an espresso and a long black, but with a very thick layer of crema on the top. This is a Swiss beverage, same way as I said, we have the piccolo invented, I think, in Melbourne. The Swiss have invented the caffè crema. So that's a beverage I have on my saved profile.
Yeah. And another interesting part is, I guess, the coffee machine category is there's tons of coffee machines, truckloads of different product variants. So it's almost quite a cluttered space. How do you go about innovating in that type of culture? I guess the consumer electronics, there's typically lots of very little subtle differences of sizes and things. And sometimes as a consumer, it's hard to pick the difference between one to the other. It might be like slightly smaller. How do you go about that? And do you get to a stage, I think we've talked about before, where you end up with too many products, and how do you tackle that?
100%. So coming back to your question before, which was when you look at the main problems that I encountered when I took over as CEO in Seiko, one of the big issues we had is even within the fully automatic space, we had 13 different platforms. 13. And then the derivatives that came from that, which essentially, then someone says, how on earth did that ever happen? Essentially, each of the project teams, every time they launched a new project, they basically said, great, blank sheet of paper, let's design something new. And they literally did. And so, 13 different platforms means that there had been 13 different project teams who had created 13 totally different things. So one of the things we looked at is, how do we take more of an automobile approach to platforming, and we've reduced it down to 3 platforms. You can imagine a little bit like Volkswagen Group. They've got a small, mid, and large car segment, which under the different brands they have in the group, it could be a Volkswagen, could be an Audi, could be a Seat, could be a Skoda. It's essentially the same car, but it's got a different material and finishing, branding, but the core of the platform is the same. So that's one of the approaches that we took. And what we then did is we created a transversal team that kind of worked across all of the platforms. And we said, this is the team which is responsible for user interface. So they will design the brand architecture around user interface, which will go across the different platforms. Then we had a team which looked at milk solution. So this team will be looking at, how do we bring different milk solutions to differentiate across the different segments and the different brands? Because we did a reset on the branding as well. We said Seiko, that's going to be our super premium brand, our Lamborghini, and Philips is going to be our mass market brand, which will appeal to quartiles 1, 2, and 3. We looked at coffee grinding and how would that work across the different places. We look at brew groups. So essentially, by having a transversal approach to technology, that allowed us, and I think coming back to your question, how do you create a range? How do you differentiate? We looked essentially at consumer focus groups and insights, and there was a really big portion of people who didn't necessarily want to be a barista. They didn't have that ambition. They didn't want to buy, a high-end rocket machine or a Marzocco or something like that, and be the barista at home, where you might need to pull 5 or 6 shots in the morning before you got the perfect shot, and they might have a Mahlkönig grinder, where they're calibrating that on a daily basis. They've got a scale, where they're weighing at 7.2 grams of coffee. There is that segment, but it's a super niche. The mass market is divided more into the capsule consumer. So I put a capsule in, Nespresso, I get a coffee, it's perfect every time. Or the consumer that also wants to have a simplified experience, but they don't want the cost and the environmental concern that there is around capsules. So they like to grind from fresh beans and explore around fresh beans. So I guess coming back to your question, how do you decide? We did a lot of strategic upfront research. What's the size of the prize? What's the addressable market? And what potentially could we play as a role to help grow that market and grow penetration? Where we saw penetration was low globally, it was only about 5 or 6%. But if you looked at consumer research, actually there was a huge number of consumers who said, as a next purchase or a future purchase, I would like to buy a machine that is a bean to cup or a fully automatic machine. And that was going to double the size of the market. So we say, okay, big potential. What are the pain points, or what are the reasons for people don't purchase? And the main pain points were around maintenance, cleaning, and the other was around milk solutions. So, I really want to have a milk-based beverage, easy, fast, tastes great, makes me look good in front of my guests,
Without squealing. That's what I always found. Like you try and froth the milk and it starts squealing at you. You don't know what to do.
Then the question around how do you then innovate in the category? One of the types of research we do, alongside specific project research, is we'll do kind of open space research. We'll just pull some consumers together, and maybe the engineers have come up with some ideas. We're not too sure how they might land with consumers or what people might think about them. We'll kind of throw them into the discussion point and let people go crazy with them and see what comes up. And one of the ideas actually that kind of bounced back from consumers, so it wasn't something we had proposed, but they kind of said, yeah, we don't really like this, but wouldn't it be amazing if you had kind of a dock on, dock off milk solution? And then the researcher who was leading the focus group, what do you mean by that? And consumers said, oh, couldn't you imagine like a Tetra Pak? Like there would be this specific, one portion size Tetra Pak that you could dock onto a coffee machine, have your latte, and then throw the pack away, right? So kind of like, okay, this is an interesting idea, right? So we called it click on, click off milk, went to Tetra Pak, proposed it to them. They were like, yeah, it's an interesting idea, but tooling and volumes and how many we would need to sell. It's kind of, okay, this kind of got like parked. It was put in a box at the back of the garage, called John, and let's just leave it there. And then later we were thinking about milk solutions, and our head of research said, oh, back in 2015, this click on, click off milk, this scored really high on consumer interest. So we thought, okay, how could we make this work? So we started to play around with this. We gave it to the innovation guys to come up with something. It took them 3 years, Justin. 3 years. But they came up with something which we later branded Latte Go. And essentially the Latte Go is a click on, click off milk container composed of 2 pieces of plastic. 1, 2. That's it, right? It's the easiest to clean milk solution in the world, completely dishwasherable. You click the 2 pieces together like a piece of Lego, pour your milk in, dock it onto the machine. It does your latte and cappuccino, and then it goes in the dishwasher. So often ideas come from different places, but at the heart of it, it should always be, what is it that consumers are actually looking for that addresses their pain points and will be something that will go, wow, this, guys, you've nailed it.
Yeah, it's nice when you identify those interest points, or you can see the consumers getting excited about it, even like in focus groups, and you're like, okay, there's something there. It's like you never know how much, I guess, potential is there, but then you've been able to actually bring them to market and to see it come to life. So it must be quite rewarding. So it's actually a great way to finish up. So, Nick, it's been so great to chat to you. Taken us on a fascinating journey into the coffee and innovation space as well. So it's been really great to chat, and thanks for joining me.
Me too. Thanks very much, Justin, and just these questions as well, reliving these amazing experiences. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Some amazing insights from a great marketing leader. If you found this insightful, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button now, as we have some great episodes coming up. And if you have any questions or would like to chat, reach out to us at customersmarts.co. Catch you next time.